Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. It's Monday, start of a new week, which means we have a new theme. Have you ever looked at a song title and thought, yeah, that's a perfect description of the song? That's what we're checking out this week. Telling titles. You look at a title, it tells you exactly what you're going to be getting into. We're starting off this week with Opeth's The Grand Conjuration. I'm expecting something big. Big orchestration, big themes, big sounds, just something very grandiose. So, let's dive into this and see if they deliver on that. Starting off with a real fun rhythm. I think we're in 5/4. It's a really weird rhythm for 5, but it's the closest vibe I can get off of it. Really gnarly bass. It doesn't feel very loud though. I'm curious what's up with that. I keep turning up my volume, hoping it feels right at some point. It just never does. It's missing width. I love that bass tone though. It would not, that's not a bass, is it? I don't know, maybe it's got an octaver on it. It would not work for every situation, but it is just, it's so meaty. Very isolating. Ooh. Yeah, so we're in 4. Really fun rhythm for 4. Haunting, creepy, isolated. Yeah, I love the hand drums. What are we conjuring though? Yeah, so we got dotted quarter notes on that. We get a hit every beat and a half. Yeah. A lead line to fill in that space. A lot of chaos going on. Real interesting harmonic element here. And keeping that rhythmic idea, the dotted quarters. Really clean ride cymbal. Yeah, I love the driving bass kicks with like the halftime on the snare and cymbal. We've shifted away from the odd rhythms to just really rigid. Yeah, so that was actually the rhythm for the guitar. So we've called it back, put it in the organ, which allowed that section to not feel as harsh as it was because we were expecting those pitches. Oh man. Now we're in a 3. Tons of power with these growls, and the guitars behind it just really filling the space. And this is up an octave too, right? There's the bass. Oh. Yeah, hitting that groove real hard. Bringing in more of these eerie elements too. What are we conjuring? That's the thing. I'm kind of scared. Are we conjuring demons? Everything's very tense and on edge. Back to 4, but only using 3 notes, which is a really nice way to transition back to the 4 out of the 3. Yeah. Nice diversity on the hi-hat, tons of timbres coming out of it. Up on the bill, down on the cymbal itself, open, closed, half opened, accents. Yeah. And it provides this intensity. The rest of the band's slowed down, but it hasn't. It can keep that energy so they can build into it. Nice production on the vocals too. Kind of like creeping around. Sped it up, got rid of the downtime between chords, increased the frequency of the whispering, build the intensity. Full-bodied guitar using the same riffs. Oh wait, no. I guess it felt like we did a bar of 3, but maybe not. Interesting snare pattern against this. Got that weird crackling over here. shifted from the ride to the crash, making the drums even bigger now. Has a really nice flow to it. It's not over yet, is it? No, we still got a minute. Do we have a minute? Yeah, what's going on with this minute? It's not just quiet, there's literally no sound here. It's weird because I can kind of hear leaves rustling. But according to the visualizer, there's no sound coming out. What is going on? Okay, there is seriously, literally, a full minute of silence at the end of that track. Huh. Alright, so, Grand Conjuration. Does this song fit the title? I think so. I don't know if it's not exactly what I was expecting given the title and given what I know about Opeth, because that's also pretty fair too, right? If I heard the Grand Conjuration and expected an orchestra, right? Full, 64-piece orchestra, um, that would not be fair. But I know what Opeth makes, and I still missed the mark. I overshot. My expectations were more than what they delivered. And part of that's probably going to be age. The video is at least 9 years old. The track is, it's 05. So almost 20 years old. 18, 17, something like that. It's an older track though. That's what I'm getting at. So I got to put that in perspective too. I don't know. I don't think it delivered on the grand element. But that's a personal thing, isn't it? Grand is an adjective, and what it means to us has varying degrees. And my idea of grand, I think, was just a little bit bigger than their idea of grand. That's fine, though. Let's get into the analysis, though. That's what most people are here for, right? Sometimes I like talking about the theme and seeing if things work for it, but honestly, it doesn't matter. The theme is really just a way to suggest songs and put them on the channel so we can analyze them. Who cares if they match perfectly? I mean, I do kind of care. That's why I talk about it. But I mean, seriously, let's get into the music. What is Opeth doing here? Lots of time signatures. I don't think we can talk about this track without bringing up metric ideas. Tempo, time signature, phrasing, metric modulation, that kind of polyrhythm. I don't think there's any polymeter in here, just polyrhythm. Everything. The very first thing we're introduced to, I'm still not entirely sure what the time signature was. I felt a 5 out of it, but the 5 wasn't really present in the song. It's just that the 5 felt the most natural to me given the strange pulse that they presented to me. And I conducted out the 5 to visually show you how I was feeling that, where I was feeling the, I guess, invisible pulses of that section. They certainly were not accenting them, but that's the neat thing about time signature and polyrhythmic ideas in general I always talk about pulse, right? When we get into 4/4, your pulse is usually the front beat or the back beat. You're either accenting 1 and 3 or accenting 2 and 4. And when you get into 5, you're typically going to group them into 3 and 2 or 2 and 3. So you can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can either have that rush at the beginning or the drag at the beginning. But when I say that, these are just the typical ways to go about accenting these, the standardized ways, what a lot of people have sort of landed on doing and what makes them, or what feels most natural within them, because historically, that's what we've done. That doesn't mean that's what you have to do. And so this is why I say a lot on this channel that, I'm feeling this time signature. I think it's this time signature. You really can't be sure what the composer was intending, because anything can be written in any time signature. And that's what I really want to showcase here, is that there was no 5 pulse in there at all, but I conducted it in 5, which means it could be written in 5. And 5 is what I felt there. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they wrote it in. They might have written it in 10/8, which probably would have made a little bit more sense based on the patterns that they were using and the note lengths they were using. But 10/8 is just, it's double 5. So and 5/4 can be written in 10/8 very easily. But yeah, I think this is just a really great showcasing of that. There was no 5 pulse there, but I conducted it in 5. And I don't know if that's what they were going for, but that's what I landed on. It didn't take long until we landed in a 4 though. Very clearly a 4 if you listen to the snare and the cymbals, but if you listen to the accented stuff, kind of all over the place. They're working with dotted quarter notes, which is a dotted note just tells you that you use the length of the note plus an extra half. So in 4/4, the quarter note gets the beat. Every beat is a quarter note. So a dotted quarter note would be a beat and a half, or it would be 3/8 notes. And we could probably end up grouping that into threes and create some sort of compound meter for that section, other than the 4/4 that I felt it in given the snare. So time signature is also kind of just very malleable. It's designed to allow for readability. And that's really about it. It guides you into understanding the flow and pulse of a section. It does not dictate how a song sounds, which is really interesting and difficult for me to wrap my head around back when I started making music, because when you play music, it kind of does dictate the sound of the song. And you really have to learn how to divorce time signature out from the song once you start getting into stuff like composition and arrangement and transposition, because it doesn't really have control over the music. It's a tool for a composer to put more information on the music for the musician or conductor to understand what the composer was going for. So yeah, we had a 5, we had a 4, and then we entered a 3. And I thought this was really interesting. As far as I remember it, our time signature started at 5, went to 4, came back down to 3, and then went back up to 4. And I think we ended on the 4. And I like this idea of counting down. Now, when we went back up into 4, we very well could have went down into 2. As I just talked about with 5 and 10, 2 and 4 can be represented very similarly, in which case we have a counting down pattern. 5, 4, 3, 2. Now this is a Grand Conjuration. There's a lot of eeriness and unsettling elements, and the song got heavier and eerier and more unsettling as the song went on. It could be very accurate that the time signature was used to count down towards a catastrophic event, the conjuration of the thing itself. I don't know. We haven't hit the lyrics, and honestly, it's a little bit of conjecture here, as I'm not entirely sure that the 5 is accurate. And saying that we went to a 2 instead of a 4 is just kind of, yeah, they're kind of the same thing. And I've already argued the 5 could have been a 10, in which case we have 10, 4, 3, possibly back to 4. So I might be reading a little bit into that, but I like this idea of bringing it down. Although there might have been some time signatures in there I'm not remembering, which completely obliterates that theory. But it's kind of neat, even if I'm wrong. Makes me want to write a song like that. Maybe increase the speed while it happens too. Oh, and I could do like a spy song while I'm at it, so it's like a bomb tick. I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself. Um, I haven't even finished this reaction yet. So yeah, they play around a lot with time signature though. And they play a lot with phrasing within the time signature, which is where polyrhythmic things come in, where we might have the snare accenting the backbeat of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have the guitars emphasizing every other beat, which would be geez, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. No, even that isn't perfect. It's going to be hard to do. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 4 and 1 and 2. Dang, I can't even do it. That's something you really got to feel. You practice it until it's muscle memory, then you can just do it. But yeah, so and is between the beats. 1 and 2 and 3, those are all your off beats. And so you would do it every three of them. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that's what they were emphasizing there in that chorus. They did it twice, and hearing that against the backbeat on the snare is just so groovy. I love it. But that's a pretty typical polyrhythm right there, is your 3 against 2. That's hemiola. Interestingly, they pushed it a little bit further than that. Instead of doing the snare on every backbeat, I think the snare is only on 4. So it's like you're getting half of a hemiola. You're only getting that 3 against 2 feel once per bar instead of twice per bar. I don't know if there's anything interesting about that specifically. It's just a cool little note. Let's get off of metrics because I think I've spent too much time just talking about numbers here. Let's see, atmosphere. They utilize a lot of different sounds. I think we had in Oregon, we had several clean and or acoustic guitars in here. We even had gritty guitars that were just quiet for some of the more atmospheric sections that were just plain eerie. A lot of sparseness. Sometimes it's just hand drums, vocals, and a guitar, really leaving a lot of the sound sphere open and empty, ready to be filled in later with distorted guitars and punchy basses and, big dramatic drums to show you just how much room is in this song so that when they rein it back and come down just a couple of instruments, you can feel how isolated you are. You know where the walls are at. You know where the outside of the sound sphere is. And now you know how much emptiness and silence is around our vocalist when they come down to just a couple instruments. It is masterful use of contrast. Now, I don't think the volume is changed much in here at all from our quiet to our loud sections. It is all the illusion of volume dynamics. But at least the width dynamics are there. The song is big at points and it is small at points, even if volume doesn't come into play there. Um, and so those are really the two atmospheres of the track is creepy and spooky and isolated and overwhelming weight and power and heaviness. And the song effortlessly moves between the two of them in order to tell this story. And I don't know quite what the story is, but I get the feeling that we are summoning something dangerous. And there's some sort of tug of war of power possibly throughout this track. I don't know. Um, that's what I'm feeling though. What the song is telling me on a first time listen. I gotta touch on the production. I think the production in this is awesome. It's lacking in a couple places, I think. As I mentioned at the beginning, I never really got to a point where it felt loud enough or big enough. There was something about it. I kept cranking up the volume, hoping to hit that point where it sounded right, and it never did. but I didn't want to crank it up too high to damage my ears. So it kind of sat at a point where I felt underwhelmed even in the big sections. Um, and maybe that's just because it's an older track. This happens sometimes in music where I'm so used to hearing a certain width of production in modern music that listening to older stuff doesn't quite match it. So I'm just going to chalk that up to me. It probably sounds phenomenal on different equipment. It might have sounded phenomenal back in the day, comparative to its contemporaries instead of comparative to what came out 20 years later. I don't know. But aside from that one issue, I suppose, that I had, the production on everything else is solid, especially when we come to guitar tone and the crafting of guitar tones and the various guitar tones we have through here. I think there's an octaver pedal being used at one point. I couldn't tell if it was a bass playing a bit higher than I would expect or a guitar playing a bit lower than I would expect. But that opening guitar sound was ominous. Just masterful tone crafted for that. Um, has anybody ever thought that making a guitar tone is like being an electronic engineer? Like making electronic music and starting with like a sine wave and then making the sound you need for your song. You start with a guitar pick or picking a guitar string, and then you mold that into whatever you want, and your options are limitless. You can just keep daisy chaining pedals together. Wild. Where was I going? Oh yeah, yeah. The production, the guitar tones, every single one of them, the small ones, the big ones, the eerie ones, and everything in between. Every guitar tone is perfectly matched to the atmosphere they were going for at the time. And with that said, also kind of leans into the smallness and largeness that I was talking about with the atmospheres. A lot of that is the production. The producer did a phenomenal job at bringing out the strengths of each of these sections and diminishing as much of the weaknesses as they could, and making all these sections sound phenomenal back to back with each other. Shout out there. Um, Sadly, that's kind of the end of my analysis, which seems a bit short for such a long track, but it's kind of strange, I think, that this song is so hyper focused on at least what today would be called djent. It's a lot of rhythmically syncopated ideas that create polyrhythmic concepts against standard beats found in the drums. This is to a lesser extent sort of like an atmospheric take on a slower Meshuggah style. For a majority of this, the atmospheric stuff is certainly very Opeth, and it's nice to hear that contrasted with the syncopated ideas. But I don't think I've heard Opeth like this before. Correct me if I'm wrong. We've done like six before, and some of them are like back at the beginning of the channel 4 years ago. I'm not going to remember that. But Opeth to me is heavy and, well, heavy or light, primarily focusing on atmosphere. That's what I think of when I think of Opeth. So to get something so metrically focused, which is almost it's a colder way of approaching music than the emotional atmosphere concept that I typically see them go on. Not so much about the musicianship, but more about how the song sounds. And it's really interesting to see this light, this side of them. Not what I would expect from them. But a lot of the song is based around that. There's so many sections that are multiple minutes of metric modulation and uh, polyrhythm. I kept wanting to call it counterpoint for rhythmic counterpoint. But yeah, polyrhythm. That I kind of have a lack of a connection to it. It's just, oh, it's that section. It's another section where we have a syncopated sound. It's another djenty moment. Okay. And they just happen to be heavy. That contrast with the lighter stuff. And I guess that is to say that this is a lot less diverse, I would say, than I would expect from Opeth as well. And this might just be a one-off, right? This is one track out of hundreds that they've written. But I find it to be too focused on that rhythmic aspect. Um, and at least that's not where my expectations were at. And it's sort of undercut my experience a little bit because of that. But I had a blast listening to this. I had a blast digging apart, breaking apart, digging into, analyzing the rhythmic aspects. So, I don't know, let's get into some lyrics and see what's going on there. Maybe I'll have some sort of epiphany once we hit that. But I think that's a pretty strong read of my first reaction to the music of the Grand Conjuration. The lyrics went over my head, but I think for good reason. This is conceptual. It seems that the story is based off of lyrics in other tracks, possibly. What I do know, though, is a little annotation on Genius says, after feeling the crushing guilt and isolation of killing his mind-addled mother, the man finally submits to the same evil that overcame his mother's mind and summons the devil and submits to his will. And that puts a lot of this into perspective now that I know what I'm reading. But it's done so in, I don't know how I would describe the language. Usually, when it has more interesting vocabulary to it, I call it flowery. But flowery feels weird. It kind of implies a brightness or an elegance, and this is elegant, but it also is not bright. At one point, he says, slake my thirst, eternal wealth. Heathen key round my neck, this poetry, our blasphemy, know the sounds of infamy, the hands of Satan assembling his flock, pale horse rider searching the earth. Um, it is interestingly written, but flowery just feels like the wrong description for it, despite the interesting vocabulary utilized here. So, yeah, we have a song where somebody feels isolation, which I talked about heavily in the quieter sections, and guilt, which I did not touch on. And I don't know that I feel anything guilty in here, but there is a schism, isn't there, between the backbeat in a lot of the gentler sections and the polyrhythm. We have two rhythms operating independently through a lot of this. And I feel like there's a concept of separation in the lyrical themes that is reflected in the musical ones. And of course, he ends up overcoming or being overcome by evil and ends up summoning the devil and becomes a servant to him, which a lot of the eeriness in the music and haunting heavy elements, especially by the end when it is the biggest moment. This would be the point where Satan has been summoned. Um, yeah, the music certainly reflects all of this, the eeriness, the isolation, um, and the conjuration of something larger than life, something massive and eerie and haunting and scary. So I asked if we were summoning a ghost, I think is what I said. I was close. um, so those are my thoughts on Opeth's The Grand Conjuration. What did you think, though? Did you enjoy it? Was there anything here that stood out to you? Was there anything that I didn't talk about or didn't dive into deep enough and you have your own perspective on it? Or maybe you just have a completely different perspective on the track as a whole? Let me know down in the comments section. Above the comments is a link for Linktree. In it takes you, if you click on it, it takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three. We have a special selection coming up next from a band we've checked out before. I think they're a smaller band. Yeah, 100 subscribers. We have checked them out before, though. I really dug what they were doing. They're called Panzerkunst. Um, if you liked what they did last time, check them out again here. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We will continue on with telling titles and check out another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.